So let me first of all welcome all of you. This is an exam prep for the 70-341 and 342 exams, Exchange 2013. For those of you that, just out of curiosity, did any of you attend this session last year or the year before? Oh, good. You guys haven't heard all my jokes yet. Okay. No, because, keep in mind, this is Exchange 2013. It's still current, but we've been going over the same content for the last couple of years, and I've been pretty much providing this session for Exchange 2013 as well as Exchange 2010, and I think I did 2007 as well. So I've been doing this particular session for a little while. So who am I? Just to give you a little bit, my name's Bob. Last name's Wrench. It's pronounced like the tool. Easy way to remember that is that my middle name is Alan. It's true. My middle name is Alan. I got my grandfather's middle names, and I'm fine with that because I could have gotten their first names. Then I'd be Siegfried Francis. I'll take Robert Allen. So, but I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I've been amongst the MCTs that you'll run into at this event. I guess it's fair to say that I'm a little bit more senior than some of them. I'm starting my 20th year as an MCT. I got certified originally in '95, and I was one of those guys. I was the 13, 14-year-old kid that found his way into the lab that had the Commodore PET back in the mid-'70s. So I started off when I was 13, 14-year-old. So I'm 51 now, so I've been doing this a while. But I'm out of Leawood, Kansas City, essentially. I work in Leawood. I live in Lawrence, Kansas. Some of you might be familiar with the University of Kansas. Okay, somebody doesn't like basketball. Who's the Mizzou guy? Come on. I knew that was coming from somewhere. Or is it a K-State guy? Or Wichita State? It's okay. I went to Wichita State. Ran track for him back in the day. So, jumping in here, I don't want to tell you how to take a test. You guys have heard all that. This is how you study and how you stay calm. I'm not worried about that part. But do want to talk a little about some of the things you have to watch out for. Obviously, we want people to get certified. 341 and 342 are the exams. Some things have changed since I gave this presentation last year. There's some new resources that I am highly recommending to anybody planning on pursuing these particular certification exams. But one thing I can tell you about these is that I'd love to tell you that they're easy. They are not. They require some study. And I started off, I consider this series of exams probably to be some of the most difficult that I've seen on Exchange. And I started off on Microsoft Mail 3.2. So I've done Mail, Exchange 4.0, and every one of them since. There's a lot of ground to cover. And I would tell you that having the Microsoft official course under your belt is helpful. It's not enough to pass the exam. I would also say that having a copy of the new books that prepare you for 70-341 and 342 can get you there. You know what? They are specifically designed to help people get over the hump. So I do highly recommend those books. I wish they had come out before, 3 years ago when I was taking the exams. So, but I can also tell you that the exam I took 3 years ago is going to be different from the exam you guys are going to be seeing while Exchange Server 2013 is up and available. Most of the feedback I get about these exams is not about my current experience with the exam. Most of the feedback I get about it has to do with students of mine that are pursuing certification. And afterwards, they know they can't tell me I saw this question. And I can't give you, obviously, questions and answers that are on the exam. You guys know that. But there are a few things that seem to be a recurring theme as far as areas of challenge on these certification exams. So I do want, when we go through this, I want to highlight and emphasize a couple of things that I think you really ought to pay attention to.
Taking out the arrows. I remember when I was taking the one for 2010, there was a multiple choice question with 4 answers, and A and B and C and D were the exact same wording, exact same punctuation, where it was basically one of them was not obviously wrong, but you still had between A and B and C and D, and you'd say, well, it's the same wording, it's the same punctuation.
Okay. That's a good point about Microsoft exams in general. One of the things that many of you already know, some of you may not be aware of, is the fact that when you're taking any exam, one thing you have to keep in mind is that Microsoft's going to pepper in some questions that don't count. They are floating out a question to see how people take those questions. What you may have got in that situation where you've got 4 answers that are identically the same, something got slipped through. And that, I haven't seen that personally, but I want to say, you saw it, and I'm not going to say, oh no, that didn't happen. It happened to you. You are going to see some questions that are going to come from so far out of left field that you wonder, it's best guess time. And I'm not going to lie to you about that. I've seen them myself. My ideal about a certification exam is that 80% of it is stuff you do every day. And then 17% are things you do on occasion. And then 3% are the things that you might have to do once or twice in your career, if ever. That's my ideal. And I can't tell you how Microsoft breaks it down, but I know that's what I would like to see. Personally, I'd love to be able to see a certification exam that's based on things people do every day. So, but that's day-to-day stuff. That's journeyman stuff. The certification exams are for experts. So that's kind of my take on that. Who's going to be taking 70-341? Exchange admins. Well, yeah, I wasn't asking for a show of hands. No, Bob, I was just coming by, and you sound like a sexy guy. I wanted to come in and talk to you about these things. Because, when I'm bored, I wanted some real excitement. I'm going to go sit in an exam prep session. Okay. I get it. You guys, getting certified is something that has value. It separates the wheat from the chaff, for lack of a better statement. So senior admins, technical leads, the people that are responsible for taking charge of a messaging environment. The experience matters. One thing that I am positive about is that this exam is not going to be ideal for somebody who's starting their second week as an Exchange admin. You need to have some experience with it. A piece of advice that I would offer to anybody is that you need to know all of your primary procedures and how to do them not only through the graphical user interface, but also do them in PowerShell. So the administrative logging that is built in to Exchange can be very valuable for you. Being able to take a look at, these are the operations that took place over the last 24 hours or last week. So jumping into this part of it, we all know that you've got these 4 sections. This is from the slide that everybody goes out to about 70-341, planning, installing, configuring, and managing transport, mailbox roles, client access, and then Exchange infrastructure, all broken out into equal parts. But we start digging in a little bit deeper into some of the things that we need to pay attention to. And some of these things you're probably not going to see as much of. Those of you that are coming from a 2010 environment to a 2013 environment pursuing that upgraded certification, you're going to recognize some things that we had in 2010. Some things have changed a little bit. An example of that, this particular term, Safety net in Exchange Server 2013 is not necessarily a new thing. It's the old transport dumpster that we had in 2010. It's just, I want to say this right. My take. Transport dumpster kind of has a little bit of a negative connotation to it. And when you're talking about something that can save your bacon, like safety net can, maybe that's a little bit more, it's a more marketable term, but it's also more appropriate for what it does as far as bailing you out in case you have an outage. The whole idea behind safety net is to make sure you have a redundant queue so that if you have messages that are going from one server to the next server, we're not going to delete them from the queue of server A until we've gone one more hop. That means that if we lose that system in the middle, we still have that message recoverable in the original queue. So that is something that is a little bit of a change. Shadow redundancy, of course, that ties in with, actually, you know what, I got safety net and shadow redundancy. That's what I did. I just did that, didn't I? Safety net is the transport dumpster. Shadow redundancy is what I just described about the queue. And that's how things get confused.
But they work together.
They do work together. They are part of the same mechanism for moving messages about. When you get into your transport site, check your diagrams. Take a look at what is being demonstrated on technet.microsoft.com and take a look at how the sites are being described and the various site options. What are the best practices when you're configuring a multi-site deployment? Take a look at recommendations for intra-site as well as inter-organizational message communication. If you wanted to set up to make sure that you had a secure channel between your business, your forest, your organization, and another, which I'm an advocate of. And I think most of you that are experienced admins know exactly where I'm going with this. It's nice to have those send and receive connectors set up specifically for one partner so that if you have a problem, you have a queue that you can go observe and manage. Domain security, transport layer security, edge transports, that's something that was, when I first started giving this talk, we didn't have an edge transport for Exchange Server 2013. So that is one of the things that has changed over the years. Message hygiene, the bane of my existence. I hate spam. I hate spam with a passion. And I don't have to tell you guys this, 95% of all your inbound email is stuff you don't want showing up in somebody's mailbox. And I fight it every day. You guys are going to fight it. You have to manage your spam confidence levels. You're going to want to get, obviously, a third-party tool that you can use to help manage it. Being a trainer in an organization that also has salespeople, do you guys have this little conversation with salespeople because they don't want anything to pass through them? They want all the email to come through and then they'll filter it out. Meanwhile, I'm getting email from stuff that I really don't need. So those types of things you will want to have to matter. Shared namespace, of course, when you start dealing with your split brain syndrome situations with DNS. We have to get in and manage, obviously, what's happening with the way the messages move. So send and receive connectors, transport rules are going to make a difference. Working with disclaimers, accepted domains, obviously pretty straightforward on that one. Some of this stuff's fairly easy. Email address policies, getting in and setting up your transport rules, address rewrite, message hygiene, obviously we've talked about that a little bit as well. So this is a sample question. One thing that I do want to tell you all. Okay, so originally when I was putting together this presentation, it was my understanding that this was going to be two presentations, one on 341, another on 342. And then finding out, no, it's one session and we're doing a bunch of stuff in there. So in my slide deck, I have a number of sample questions that are hidden because we just don't have time to get into them. So that might be a reason that you may want to go ahead and pull these down. Throw that out there. And just go take a look at the slide deck. You'll see a number of them already hidden. And the other aspect of it is get over and take a look at the study hall and take a look at what MeasureUp's got going on with their practice exams too. So you're the Exchange admin for your Exchange 2013 organization. You want to ensure that all messages sent to users outside your organization. You know, one of the things that any of us will probably recognize is that this is an important term whenever we start taking these certification exams. Outside the organization contain the sender's name, address, division, telephone number, mobile phone number at the bottom of the message, along with a standard policy disclaimer. What should you do? And we have options. New journal rule. Is journaling taking place? This is not journaling. Use the new transport rule commandlet to specify the disclaimer text and AD attributes of the sender. Possibility. Use the get mailbox what? No. Use the get mailbox command to specify the disclaimer text. Nothing to do with what's happening, because if you're using get mailbox is retrieving static content. It has nothing to do with messages that are moving. Specify the disclaimer text and AG attributes of the sender in the delivery tab of the send connector. No, but that last answer is the trap answer, isn't it? Because, you know, the best answer, I think we'd all concur, is going to be B. But for the uninitiated, they're going to take a look at that fourth option and go, that might be it. So that's one thing that, I'm not telling you stuff you don't already know. How many of you, well, if you're planning on taking an Exchange certification, I'm going to work from an assumption that everybody is certified in at least one thing. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. So everybody's probably taken 410, 411, 412, or maybe 417 as a. You don't have to admit to it. There's no lie detector up here. We don't. I believe you can make it, friend. Yes. You can reach out there and grab that certification. Can I get a hallelujah? Okay, so praise you, Robin Williams. Okay, so he is with us today. But that's one thing to keep in mind. So we've got that new transport rule option. I was trying to figure that blue color against the red was the only way I could find to really stand that off. But when you're going through and studying, take a look at good practice exams and take a look at what they're saying as far as what's in their sample answers. Granted, if it's a four-part question or four possible answers, there's a reason why three of them are wrong. But you need to understand why something is wrong as well as why something's right. So, yeah, that's why I put in things about using the new transport rule commandlet, disclaimer text, new journal rule, and get mailbox commandlet. All of these are pertinent to understanding where this exam is going to go. Another one I've got here. So you're the Exchange admin for your organization. The CIO wants to ensure that, information concerning new products and development does not leak to the media or competitors. You must develop a plan to prevent your users from forwarding messages that contain the name of a product under development to users outside the organization. What should you configure? So create a single remote domain entry, configure the appropriate settings to prevent forwarding. That has nothing to do with this. Create a single transport rule with the appropriate RMS template. And once again, it's transport rules versus journal rules between B and C. And then create a single journal rule and apply a legal hold. Once again, the option here should be fairly obvious. We're going to go with the transport rule in that case. Okay, so that starts getting into rights management templates. One area that I would emphasize has been a little bit troublesome for some of the people that I've been around. So taking a look at TechNet, looking up specifically rights management services for Exchange Server 2013, certainly be helpful. How many of you have gone out and checked out TechNet Virtual Labs? One thing that I hear from a lot of folks that are running production environments is that they're using most of the features in Exchange Server 2013, but there are some things that they may not be getting into for one reason or another. And one of those things that a lot of people have not implemented is RMS. If you haven't implemented RMS in your environment, you still need to find a way to get some exposure to it. And whether it's going through the Microsoft Virtual Academy, whether it's going through TechNet Virtual Labs, all of those things can certainly be helpful. And of course, taking a look at some of the blogs from Microsoft MVPs, I know can be very valuable as well. You guys are pretty familiar with, have you ever searched for an MVP blog? I mean, there's some really good guys out there that know their stuff, whether it's Paul Cunningham, whether it's Thomas DeClercq, whether it's Paul Robichaux, which I'm going to be recommending a couple of different things from Paul here coming up, J.P. Brzezzi. There's some really good people that write stuff all the time, and you can find excellent blog entries pertaining to rights management services and dealing with those templates. Planning, if you are not familiar with the Exchange sizing tool, the role sizing calculator that you can download from the Exchange team blog, pull it down, take a look at it, get some familiarity with it. It is important, not just for the exam purposes, but also for practical deployment. Storage performance requirements, of course. Virtualization. Okay. We know that Exchange is going to be supported on multiple virtualization environments. But one thing I want to throw out that I pick up from teaching the 20341 course and 20342 on a regular basis. How many of you have taken 20341, the Microsoft official curriculum course within a training center? One thing that is an incredible benefit about that particular course, and I'll tell you a little story. One of my first certifications was Windows for Workgroups. I know, it kind of sounded like a punchline, but Windows for Workgroups was an absolutely horrid certification exam, because you could fail that exam specifically on not knowing the Microsoft at Work facts. I went through the resource kit. Microsoft at Work facts was not addressed in the Windows for Workgroups resource kit. I checked every book that I could get my hands on. Did not find anything about it. The only place that covered that component of Windows for Workgroups was the official Microsoft curriculum. There are, on occasion, some things that are in the Microsoft official curriculum that don't appear anyplace else. So if you've taken a course or you have a friend that's taken the course, I'd tell you, go through that course, and anywhere where you see the word note followed by that colon, that is about as much a highlight and a star, asterisk, highlight this, that you're going to find in any Microsoft official curriculum. MCTs aren't going to tell you what's on the test. But what I can tell you is that when I see something that has the word note beside it, and it's going to be at the bottom of a page, and it might be even in smaller type, read that, highlight it, know it. Because my experience has led me to believe that that is an important thing to undertake. So if you have access to it, by all means, you want to pay attention to some of those things. Public folder placement, the changes that we've seen from Exchange 2010 to 2013 with regard to public folders and how to manage that part of it. The best resource for that I can tell you is going to be TechNet, but if you check, how many of you have a copy of Mastering Exchange Server 2013 by David Alfasi? I want to say it's chapter 7. It's either chapter 4 or chapter 7 about migrating public folders from the Exchange 2007 to 2010 to 2013. I think that chapter is pretty solid as far as the procedures for migrating that, so that could be a good groundwork for those of you that need to worry about how to migrate those public folders. David Alfasi, E-L-F-A-S-S-Y. If you like, I can go get him. He's just down the hall. But David's a great guy and one of the more knowledgeable Exchange people around. But that public folder placement, the public folders themselves, pretty solid. Offline address books, public folders, still a little bit more about that. Deploying mailbox server roles, hierarchical address lists, not that big of a deal, but that stuff's all pretty mundane. High availability. You can't know enough about highly available solutions. Database availability groups, fixing some of the problems that can occur with database availability groups, certainly helpful. Failure domains, understanding where things can go wrong, what can cause things to go south on you. Managing your DAG networks, which of course we want to make sure that we've got our production LAN on our DAG network on separate networks. File share witness. Okay, this part of it on planning your file share witness, not just important for 341, but also really important when you're doing your site planning in 342. Because you have so many different options when it comes to dealing with a file share witness, especially when you are considering putting in a DR site or multiple DR sites. Because there's times that you think, what are our best options? Well, we've got these two sites. Okay, so you've got a file share witness, you've got a backup file share witness. But what if you have 3 sites available? That changes things on a big level, because now you're going, okay, I've got primary site, DR site, file share witness in the 3rd site. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to have to take into consideration to be ready for when you see the questions pop up. Monitoring and troubleshooting the mailbox role. Obviously, backup and restore are going to come into play. Database copy activation, mailbox role performance. 2 tools that you should have knowledge of, JetStress and LoadGen. So I'm probably not telling you something you don't already know. If you're working with Exchange, you're probably familiar with those 2 particular utilities. So that part of it's pretty clean. Database replication, content indexing. Content indexing. Knowing how to recover from a failed or failed and suspended content index is something that I would highly recommend, not just for an exam purpose, but also because it's important in real life too. One thing I would recommend, just from a Exchange admin to Exchange admin perspective, Paul Cunningham has a great article on dealing with failed and suspended content indexes, and he's also got a nice little script. So this is practical stuff, a little bit off to the side, but his article in his blog about content indexing is fantastic. Backup and recovery solutions. You're not going to be asked to know how to back up Exchange with Windows backup, okay? Because how many Exchange admins are using Windows backup, okay? So don't worry about that part of it so much. But managing lag copies, understanding the PowerShell, the PowerShell commandlets to manage your lagged copies is something that you'll definitely want to know going in. Backup solutions, dial tone restores. Okay. What I would emphasize about dial tone restores. You want to know how to do this step by step by step. Know both sides of it. What can I do in the GUI? What can I do in PowerShell? Procedures matter. And if you've taken a certification exam recently, one area that I would emphasize is that you might see something that has 6 possible steps, and you've got to figure out which of those go into the other column and in what order. So when you're going through TechNet and taking a look at the library articles on Exchange, keep your eye open for procedures. This is step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And memorize those. Find some sort of mnemonic device that you can use to memorize that order for those commands. And know how to do it both GUI and PowerShell. It matters. Because you might see something. These first three are in PowerShell. Then the fourth command, there's no fourth command there that's normally PowerShell. You got to know the GUI trick for getting that done. Mailbox servers, resource mailboxes, scheduling, dealing with policies. Regardless, with scheduling, team mailboxes, of course, linked mailboxes. Know the when you're going to use send as, send on behalf of, full control, and know the differences between all three. Obviously, those are going to be important. Also, mailbox auditing relative to that as well. When somebody has send on behalf excuse me. Somebody has send as permissions, that's impersonation. You want to know how to find out who has access to do something like that. And then, of course, you get into, I mentioned send as, send on behalf of, permissions on mailboxes, permissions on folders, all of that other stuff. Client access, of course, we get into those areas as well, working with legacy client access service and current Exchange client access servers where you have to have them. Namespace client services, that's all fairly mundane. Mobility solutions, Outlook web app policies, allow, block, and quarantine side, apps for Office, which are cute. Actually, the Bing Maps is okay so long as I get the right map. And then load balancing, of course. Hey, one other thing here. Where's that? I want to go, hold on. I want to go back one thing here. Okay, load balancing. Windows and network load balancing. You need to know it and how to implement it, even though you probably would go running screaming into the hills before you'd ever implement it in your production environment. But understanding the basics of it certainly can be helpful. There are some things, when we talk about exams and we talk about things like this, remember that this is a Microsoft exam. And what you might take away from this might have to do with implementing Windows load balancing, but you might see a reference to a hardware load balancing solution. And what would I tell you about that? Let me say, if somebody approached me and gave me a question, and today it mentioned Windows network load balancing or going with a hardware-based load balancing solution, I would not grade somebody down for mentioning a hardware load balancing solution. So if you see something like that, I probably wouldn't worry about it a whole lot. Microsoft's fairly objective with things of that matter. And then, of course, client connectivity, knowing all your issues there, authentication, web services, managing access to other servers behind that. Okay. So here you go. You're the administrator for an Exchange 2013 organization that has a single AD domain in 3 locations. CIO asks you to deploy Office 2013 to all client computers. More users will be using mobile devices to check their email than in the past. You must plan the deployment of client access servers in all locations so that a user's profile settings on mobile devices are going to be automatically configured. Okay, so you got ActiveSync, AutoDiscover, Availability, and IMAP 4. Okay, right off the top of your head, there's a couple of these you ought to be able to scratch off real quick, because IMAP 4 is not something we're going to be using with a mobile device. In fact, in just about every environment that I come across, if they're using POP3 or IMAP 4 at all, it's primarily because they've got some sort of service running on their network that uses POP3 or IMAP 4. So we know that's not it. Availability service has to do with your calendar. So there you go. So it comes down to ActiveSync versus AutoDiscover, but the giveaway here is the part about being automatically configured. And that's where I'm taking a look at going with AutoDiscover. So that's another example of that. And there, once again, I've got links for all of those possible answers, and those are the kinds of things that we do want to have some familiarity with. Exchange infrastructure, planning for our domain controllers, global catalog servers, DNS changes required for Exchange, how we implement that. Preparing domains for Exchange, well, that's part of the, I don't know, that's planning, I guess. That would still fall into that category. Schema changes, plan around the 80 site topology. Workload management. Okay, remember I mentioned that there are some topics that seem to be troublesome? Because, a lot of your Exchange 2007, 2010 admins, they never had to worry about workloads. So that is something that I would highly recommend you spend a little bit of extra time with. Configuring user workload policies, system workload policies, knowing, managing the levels when you start dealing with things like user expectation, and when you're dealing with how we provide resources and make resources available when people are using Outlook web app. So that part of it matters as well. Monitoring user and system workload events. Check the tools that you use for monitoring. Some are GUI based, some are command line based. And some of them can sneak up on you a little bit. RBAC, role-based access control, giving people access, using that model. Service level agreements, planning for updates, change management, downtime requirements. RPO and RTO, a couple of terms that most of you probably have some familiarity with. So when we have an outage, the recovery point objective, the recovery time objective, two different things. Recovery time objective is how soon we can get services back up. Recovery point objective is how much are we going to lose. So if I know it's going to take, 2 hours, am I going to lose 3 hours worth of email? I don't know. Those are the types of things that have to be taken into consideration when you are calculating that as part of providing a level of service. You've created a custom management role based on the database's built-in management role, but you do not want users assigned to that role to perform all of the tasks if it's a parent role. What commandlets would you use to modify the custom role to remove the tasks that role members are allowed to carry out? And once again, we're talking about dealing with management roles and management role entries and tailoring them to a specific purpose. This is, if you haven't done a lot of this, depending on what your role is with Exchange in your organization, there is a TechNet virtual lab that specifically gets into working with RBAC. And RBAC, it's new, relatively new to, you know what, I'm jaded. Because what's new to me is different than what's new to other people. Role-based access control obviously coming about in the last couple of iterations of both Exchange, and we see it with Lync as well, for those of you that are dealing with unified communication. So, there's a TechNet virtual lab that walks you through these procedures about dealing with role-based access control and making sure users, admins, have the ability to run the commandlets that they need to run to do their jobs. Give people what they need. It may not be everything give them what they need. It may not be everything they want, but give them enough that they can get their job done. And I need to edit the colors on that. So that gets into using those various commandlets. I was going through the Exam Ref, the new book that is specifically designed to support the 70-341 exam, and written by Bhargav Shukla and Paul Robichaud. Bhargav Shukla has saved my bacon on more than one occasion. Very bright young man. So I give him credit for saying some really important things. And Paul Robichaud, for those of you that have heard of Paul or know of Paul, know that he's probably one of the top MVPs relative to Exchange in the world. That first sentence is something that you should take to heart when you're taking a look at some of the certification questions. You may very well receive multiple questions about, you need to implement this solution, these are your options, what is the supported configuration that's most cost effective? And you'll see things about the number of servers, the number of databases, what do you really need? Go back and take a look at the details in the question. The secret is in there. when you go back and take a look at the long explanation as to what that exam is on, or what that question deals with. Know your add-ons. Jet stress and load gen I already mentioned. The role requirements calculator I also mentioned as well. That's an important one to pull down. Virtualization. When this exam first came out, we didn't see a lot of questions about virtualizing Exchange, but here we are 2-3 years later, and from what I understand, people are seeing questions regarding virtualization. A couple of things that are worth mentioning. We know it's supported in VMware, we know it's supported in Hyper-V. That's really not the question, but one area that you need to be cautioned about. You can spin up a server in Azure, and I teach the Office 365 course, and we do that. We set up Exchange servers in Azure. It is not a supported configuration. So that's one thing that I'd keep in my back pocket, knowing that Azure is not going to be a supported configuration for any type of client access server, mailbox server. Just don't go there right now. Like I said, we do it as part of the Office 365 course because of the way that class has to be treated. There's some very unique aspects to that particular course, but that's something that I just make a note of that. So other things, you've got numerous sessions. When I was locked out of my calendar for a little bit, so I'm not sure what Exchange 2013 sessions are still coming up. But watch out, because when I was going through that, I noticed there was a bunch of 2016. Those aren't going to help you with this exam, okay? But stick with the 2013. If somebody were to come up to me today and say, Bob, I've got limited resources, I need to get one good thing that's going to help me get over the hump and pass this certification exam, I wouldn't hesitate. This is a new book. This book came out within the last week. So I've looked it over. Like I said, it's written by Paul and Bhargav Shukla. These guys know their stuff. So take a look at the details. Take a look at the important descriptions and information that is in a book like this. So how many of you are sitting next to somebody you work with? So you got to buy one copy and share it. Okay? But I'd tell anybody today, if you're planning on getting one resource, I'd love to be able to tell you, hey, come take my class. But I threw in the condition about limited resources. I do love having people in my classes, but at the same time, the Microsoft official curriculum and the official Microsoft course, the purpose of that class is not to get people to pass the exam. It's to get people out there with the knowledge they need to do their jobs. When you start getting to a level of expertise, this is where that comes in. Yeah?
Did they give us that book in the class, or no?
This book?
Yeah.
No. No. If you take the course, you get Microsoft official curriculum, which is bigger. So this is a solid book. Well, the thing is, we get into a lot of things in classes, and a lot of them are labs that we're setting up, and we're managing a number of things. And even then, when I'm teaching the class, I may not be able to go into every detail about what's in that book, but people always have the book. I want to focus on making sure they get their hands on it and learning how to get their jobs done. This is how you do a backup, this is how you restore, things like that. I'm not dealing with people with 3 years of experience on Exchange 2013. I'm dealing with people that are doing an upgrade from 2010 or 2007. I'm dealing with people that are migrating from Notes. I'm dealing with people that are migrating from GroupWise. Yes, in Kansas, we still have GroupWise. But we're working on it. Kansas, we've got our own set of problems, man. I can tell you. So, that book, Mastering Exchange Server 2013. Okay, this is David Elfasi's book. As a matter of full disclosure, I was a technical contributor on that book, so I'm biased. I like the book. It's a good book, especially the part about public folders. I thought that was really well written. So, head over next door, down the way in the study hall, where we've got practice exams. Check them out. Even if you just want to take 15 minutes, take a look at what's on there. Do so. And of course, I mentioned TechNet Virtual Labs. 70-342, a lot of the same, well, it's more big picture stuff. There's also another ExamRef book that I'd point you to, but you know, the site resiliency part, the security aspects, compliance, archiving, discovery, all of those are important. But the one that my students have seemed to have the most difficulty with has been the top part about unified messaging. So spending a little bit of extra time on that component is probably time well spent. And then today, we've got to worry about coexistence, hybrid scenarios, migration, and federation. Those are going to be important topics as well. So jumping in, once again, sorry about the typeface on this, a little bit small. So configuring unified messaging. The 70-342, or the 20342 Microsoft course does a pretty good job getting into this. The other part of it is actually the Link Enterprise course does a nice job talking about how to tie Link in a unified messaging environment. So if those of you that have access to that information, I would recommend it because it's something you want to configure on both sides. IP gateways, unified messaging call routers, the auto attendant, call answering rules, high availability on that side of it, dial plan. Okay. Managing dial plans, unified messaging features for a user, voicemail, mailbox, okay, all that. And then more about that. Working with mutual TLS, monitoring calls and call statistics. So knowing how the various scripts that are in the scripts directory when you do the Exchange install, understand what each of those scripts does. I know it sucks. I know. You're a lucky person. I've probably failed more of these exams than you'll ever have to take. You know, so I get anxiety. I probably have an ulcer from all of my Microsoft certification exams that I've ever had to take. And you know, that is the downside about being an MCT. So yeah, after you've passed about 60 of them, yeah. So, but hey, the new stuff comes out next year. Yay me! I really hope my wife's invention takes off. Okay, troubleshooting and configuring quality of service. I'm thinking about getting, okay, so SIP communication, another important part about this. If for no other reason, understanding how SIP works and the tools that are available, and also personally on a note from an old geek, SIP has got to be one of the coolest protocols on the face of the planet that's ever been created. So I'm biased on that one. Unified messaging, a little bit more about that. Preparing to migrate, planning a migration strategy. There are tricks that you have to go through when you're engaged in an upgrade from 2010 to 2013. So understanding those components certainly is going to be helpful. Moving unified messaging mailboxes between sites can be tricky. Redirect the SIP gateway. Decommission the legacy system, that part of it. So you're the UM administrator for your Exchange 2013 organization. Your company has decided that all sales staff should use protected voicemail. You know what? That's a really good phrase to highlight or jot down right now and understand how that all works. So what should you do? Choose two. Create a new unified messaging dial plan called Sales Dial Plan, configured for protected voicemail. Within your existing unified messaging dial plan, create a new unified messaging mailbox policy called Sales Unified Messaging and configure it for protected voicemail. Assign Sales UM to the sales mailboxes and assign the sales dial plan to the sales mailboxes. And the big deal there was setting up the plan, but I think I missed, well, you've got the sales UM, so C, so B and C. I didn't get that highlighted. I apologize for that. Thought I had. So, once again, a link on Unified Messaging Dial Plans is there. You've been asked to configure unified messaging for your Exchange 2013 organization. Your company uses Link 2013 Enterprise Voice for telephony. What information do you need to get from the Link administrators to properly configure the unified messaging IP gateway? A fully qualified domain name with a Link mediation pool, subscriber access number, auto attendant number, or the FQDN of the Link Edge pool. And we get into the mediation pool. The mediation pool is going to be fairly important on that side of it because anything having to do with enterprise voice has to go through that mediation pool. Okay, and a little bit more on that. Site resiliency is also going to be other things that you'll have to pay attention to when you are working with the 342 exam. Managing a site resilient DAG. How many of you are familiar with Scott Schnoll? Scott is like the Gandalf of Exchange. I remember wondering, Scott knows as much about Exchange as anybody walking around. He works for Microsoft. He is, I wonder if he's Vulcan. I remember asking him, so what are they going to do now that Vulcan's gone? Where do you go for Ponfar? So, anyway. No, Scott is a great guy and is about as knowledgeable as you're going to find. But a couple years ago, I remember we got into it was a birds of a feather session, and everybody, he was holding court. But this was the topic. Database availability groups, using DAC mode. When do you use DAC mode? What do you need to do with your sites when you're using DAC mode? How many servers do you have to have in each site to properly implement DAC mode? Go through TechNet, look for Scott Schnoll's name, S-C-H-N-O-L-L. He has written up every single one of those possibilities. And let's say if I were writing an exam today and throwing in a question about site resiliency, I would probably pull something right out of his blog. There was that pause there for effect. Okay. But yeah, absolutely. That's where I'd steer you. CAS solutions, site rollover, certificates, familiarity there. Transport, configure MX records for failover scenarios. That part of it's pretty well documented in just about everything you come across that deals with MX records and high availability. Plan and configuring send and receive connectors for site resiliency. That one's probably been beaten to death too. Quorum issues. Remember, a frustration of mine is that very often when we start getting into setting up database availability groups and talking about failover clustering, is that we tend to take a look at all of the possibilities of what could define quorum. Don't waste your time looking up all the different ways that quorum can be defined in an Exchange environment. There's really only one way that matters, and that's going to be based on the nodes that are available in the cluster. And depending on whether you have an even or an odd number of available nodes, your file share witness. That's all that really matters. Yeah?
So you don't get into like DAC bit at all?
Well, that's a different story. Okay, because knowing all of the options with data center activation coordination, that is, I would want to know all the little rules about that. Because, when do you implement DAC mode? Because sometimes when you're setting up one site with a DR site, sometimes you use DAC mode, sometimes you don't. If you've only got one server in each site, there's no point in setting up DAC mode. But what happens if you're talking about going across 3 sites, I've got 2 servers over here, 3 servers over here, file share witness up above, that's when you want to have a really solid understanding about, how DAC mode is going to operate in an environment like that. So, yeah, that's important. Mail flow, especially when you have failover between two sites. Did I spell that really? I did the British spelling. Troubleshoot data center activation. Okay, so security strategy. What can you do? RBAC, BitLocker, smart cards, IRM with rights management services, secure MIME, domain and secure TLS, especially that can be important if you're going with something other than an edge transport server for your message hygiene. You got to set up a relationship with an external appliance. So that kicks in there. IRM, ADRMS. See, once again, more about rights management services. You're going to have to spend a little bit of time with that. But take a look at, like I said, blogs. Take a look at what they're saying in TechNet. The one aspect of this that I really appreciate about the guys that write the blogs, if you're going through TechNet, it looks like it was sometimes written by a robot. It gives you what you need. It deals with the facts. But sometimes you want to take a look at a blog and see how somebody's explaining it to another human being. You can tell when it's been written. Technical writers have certain standards that they have to follow. But when somebody's writing a blog, they get to make it more personal. They get to make it more appealing. What's another good word for that? Readable. But they're conveying, I had this experience, this didn't work, this did work, and why we set it up a particular way, and it has good explanations associated with it. More about mailbox and administrative auditing. Of course, auditing is going to be important. Administrative audit logging, always turned on. Mailbox audit logging, turned off by default, has to be turned on. And that's going to be particularly important when you're dealing with send-as environments. Interpreting all your audit logs and being able to look that information up. Certificates are always going to be an important part of this. Thanks for coming. That's okay. I know some people are going to have to. Where are we at on time? Okay. I know what I'm supposed to be done at 4:30. Is that right? Okay. Private key availability, IRM protection, all that stuff's important. Archiving solutions. Know how to set up your archive so that your archive mailboxes are in the cloud. Absolutely. So create your policies. We know about that. On-premises versus storage for archiving solutions. Rules about setting up the various retention policies, data loss prevention. What are the built-in rules? Can you customize them? Of course, you can customize them. Designing a DLP solution, customizing that. Tags and policies. Get familiar with those, understand what is part of the default, how you might want to modify that. Configure the Manage Folder Assistant. And remove and delete your tags. Obviously, we want to be able to manage those tags. Mail tips, ethical walls, message classifications, and message classifications might be one that you want to take a little bit extra time with, especially the part about getting those classifications into the various Outlook clients, because there's a little bit of a trick there with that, with those config.xmls. And then coexistence with Exchange Online. You're going to see a lot more emphasis on hybrid configurations. So know how to, you're going to want to go through and say, this is how we're going to do this. I've got on-premises. We're going to go to a hybrid deployment with Exchange Online, moving mailboxes back and forth, working with Active Directory Federation services. ADFS plays an important role in that. And then Exchange Federation, Federation Trust with Microsoft Federation Gateway. Sharing policies, firewall relationships, organization relationships. On-premises coexistence with legacy systems. So you got to know which ones you can, which ones you can't. You can play nice with Exchange 2007 and 2010, but not with earlier versions of that, Exchange 2003 or 2000. I really have no idea who would still be on Exchange 2000 at this point, or even 5.5 or geez. Proxy redirect, we got about that mail flow. Let me move forward. Migration. once again, emphasizing the migration to public folders. You got to get fairly comfortable with that and know the scripts that have to be run and what order they have to be run. Plan for discontinued features, transport, federation, organization relationships, troubleshooting across the board, obviously, DeerSync, cross-forest availability, all important. To emphasize this on the 342 exam, unified messaging. That seems to have been a challenge for the people that I've mentored through this particular exam. Do's and don'ts of DAC mode, I mentioned that. Site resiliency, high availability. Hybrid deployments, obviously, when you're dealing with Exchange 2013 and Exchange Online in Office 365. Here, Paul Reed, Steve Goodman wrote this book's been out a little longer, but I've gone through it. I'm very impressed with this book. So I did notice that they had a couple of copies of 342 over in the bookstore. That's why those other guys left already. Okay, yeah.
Both those books you mentioned, do they do any justice at all to the config bits that you were talking about? Like, the TechNet articles are super sparse. There's nothing on QoS for 2013. Do these books cover any of that?
Yes.
All right, good. Thank you.
As he heads up now at the door to go get the last copy of that book. 25%. I went with the Kindle version, but I was really impressed with what they went into with that. One of my students that went through 342, when this book came out, I said, you probably want to check this book out, and he said it really helped him a lot. So just throw that out there for your consideration. I'm not trying to sell you guys books. That's not my job. My job is trying to tell you what you need to know to pass this exam. And I think of all the resources I've come across, these two books, the 70-341 and 70-342, are the two single best resources that I've come across so far. On Exchange Team Blog, you had me at a low. Okay. You can always go out to Microsoft's website and take a look at who the MVPs are in any topic. And in the case of Exchange, you've got a couple hundred MVPs out there, but there's probably 20 of them or so that are very, very active about blogging. Paul Cunningham is one of those guys. Thomas DeClerc's another one. You can look up who the MVPs are. And you'll also find out going out to, what's Thomas DeClerc's blog? A lot of them have links to the other MVPs that also maintain their blogs. So even if it's not, even outside of preparing for an exam, just day to day, I need to keep my chops up. Those guys write some really good stuff. Paul Cunningham, Bhargav Shukla have, like I said, both bailed me out a couple of times just by articles that they wrote. And what Paul told me about the content index has certainly helped out. Tony Redmond, Paul Robichaux. Okay, if you want to know how storage of mail works in Exchange and what the mail server does, you cannot go to a more knowledgeable authority than Tony Redmond. Actually, funny you should bring that up, because these are what my take on what I'd have on my desk, or I'd have on my reading device. The Microsoft Exchange Connectivity Clients and Unified Messaging book. We talked about unified messaging a little bit. Have you seen this one?
Yeah, the first two I wasn't really impressed.
Well,
The last one I don't have.
that one was Paul Robichaux, and then Tony Redmond wrote the one about mailbox and high availability. These books came out fairly early, but I know Paul's here. I haven't seen Tony. Tony's here? Good. So everybody gather together, corner them. And say Bob sent us. The last one, David Elfassi, like I said, I have my own bias about this one, but David and L. Peter Bruzzese, some of you might know him from his work with Pluralsight, Slash, Train Signal. Very knowledgeable man. So, but once again, still the best information is still going to be the most current information. It's hard to compare something that was written last week with something that was written 2 years ago. So much has transpired since then. So, but the thing is, the stuff that was written last week isn't going to be popping up in a certification exam. So that's what you have to take away from that. Remember that there's what you might think is the right answer for you may not be the Microsoft answer, which I think all of us have probably encountered in the past. I'm going to be taking this stuff. I've got my own blog that I haven't done anything with in a couple months, but I'm going to go ahead and get back on it. But bobsterism.com is me. Those of you that have been around the Microsoft Certified Trainer community at all, my nickname's the Bobster. So I think it just comes with venerability. In other words, Bob didn't get promoted. So, no, I like it. I'm around. I'm easy to spot. I'm loud. I'm obnoxious. I always joke that I'm big, obnoxious, and bald. I'm my own acronym. So, but I appreciate your consideration. I'd love to be able to have everybody, if you fill out a positive evaluation of this event, we're going to put you in a raffle for a Segway to use the rest of the conference. I'd love to do that. Get you a gator. These knees don't do that. No. A long time ago, I was an athlete, and then I had 4 knee operations. Yeah, that did it. Good question?
So Microsoft seems to be updating the exams pretty frequently.
I don't think that any exam has been as frequently updated as the Exchange exams.
417, I'm having a hell of a time.
417. Oh, that one. Yeah. I had a 10-year run of passing exams the first time until I hit 417.
That is an evil exam.
Yes.
I've done practice tests with both Transcender and Measure Up, and I am finding just questions that do not have any,
For 417, do not prepare for 417. Prepare for 410, 411, and 412. That's the way you tackle that one. Don't treat it like it's one exam. No, it's 3 exams. You need to know 410, 411, and 412 to get ready for that test.
Is it still broken up into 3 distinct sections?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, at least it was 3 years ago.
I remember taking the equivalent one for 08. They made you take the first part and then you couldn't go back.
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff going on.
It's basically 3 separate tests.
It's still like that.
I remember. Yeah, it's a challenging exam.
It's a big one.
I know. And for a lot of people, I wouldn't recommend 417. I'd tell them to take 410, 411, and 412. Yeah. I'm going to take it. I've already got it on a OneDrive. If you want to come up and pull a copy off, you can do that. If you got a thumb drive, you can pull it off right here. I don't care. But it's going to be available on the Ignite site. It's available on the Ignite site. I'm going to load it up on a OneDrive and make it publicly accessible. So if you go out to bobsterism.com later today, I'll have the link so you can click on that, and it'll take you to my OneDrive folder, and you can pull it down from there. Yeah.
They still do simulations anymore, or are they done with those?
Assimilations? I'm going to turn you into the Borg. Engage, make it so. Some to a degree, I would guess. You know what? Here's the thing. I haven't taken this exam in 2.5+ years now. So what they're doing today, I knew about the procedural things. As far as a full-blown simulation, I don't know exactly what they're doing with Exchange today. But there's probably, I think it's reasonable to say you got to click in the right spot. There's going to be some radio buttons you got to click on, or which menu option you need to click to get into this other area. Yeah, I would expect to see some of that. Well, what else? What do you get? Come on, I'm here. Use me.
Are there any undocumented, there's many undocumented features in Exchange 2013 because it's based on RFC.
Can't be. Federal law requires that software that is being used at the federal government level cannot have undocumented features. I'm just telling you the law.
Oh, I see.
And no one breaks the law.
Okay, I didn't bring up Hillary's server, okay? I'm not talking about that.
So there won't be any undocumented features on this test.
What I'd be cautious about might be it's not so much undocumented, it's where it's documented. That's what I'd be worried about, because just because we've got these other books and stuff, there might be one turn of a phrase or one note that shows up in the Microsoft official curriculum that may not show up in another book, but there might be a question. That question's still fair game.
Because on message transport, for example, it's based on RFC documents and document there as to what's available, but not within any Microsoft documentation.
That's where the 3 years of experience in messaging comes in. Yeah.
Things like, describe an SMTP transaction.
No.
It's all Microsoft stuff.
It's all, yeah. Yeah.
I thought you were talking about things like replay manager or something.
How you doing?
Never better.
That's great.
Question for you.
Yes, hold on. The hand went up just before you said that. Yeah.
What's the best way to get some like UN experience lab that you can't easily replicate? Like,
I mentioned the TechNet virtual labs online. They're free.
but you can do UN stuff in those.
Yeah, they've got some unified mess. I believe they've got a configuration lab where you have to set up between Link 2013 and Exchange 2013. Yeah, it's pretty solid. The other thing you can always do, you know what? And I'm not always real big about endorsing this, but I regularly go out to YouTube and take a look at what other people are demoing. I've used some of the things in class because, you know what, I saw a guy put together a really nice presentation on Windows Update Services. He goes into more depth than what I ever went into in class, so I said, hey, it's Wednesday afternoon, it's popcorn day at my shop, grab some popcorn, we're watching a movie. The guy goes through 45 minutes about setting up WSUS in every way you would ever want to set it up. So we've got an incredible array of resources that are available to us. I only put up a few things, but I do check out YouTube. And I'm going to bet that there's probably somebody that's got a demo out there about how to configure unified messaging between Link 2013 and Exchange 2013. Oh, yeah. I haven't, I may not be able to see it, but I'm going to bet somebody's got probably a pretty good one.